How are you feeling? You've been unconscious for 2 days.
Chapter 8. The person who entered the hospital room was none other than Assistant Professor Lim. He checked the complexion of Suho sitting on the bed and met the student's gaze.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for running away alone.
He apologized immediately. To be fair, there was nothing a single E-class hunter could do in the same situation at that time. The first thing that Professor Lim learned after awakening as an E-class hunter was to run away as far as he could if he meets a monster. However, Suho, who was just an ordinary person at the time, was extremely heroic. He rescued people from such a dangerous place, risking his life. Professor Lim was greatly embarrassed of himself, thinking how cowardly he was as compared to Suho.
It's all right, sir. A professor is in no place to apologize to someone like me. No, even if I had 10 mouths, I still have no excuses.
After repeatedly apologizing, Professor Lim took out the hot porridge from the shopping bag he was carrying and served it in front of Suho.
All right, you're hungry, aren't you? You must eat porridge if you have an empty stomach. Here, the spoon. Oh, so quick-witted.
Rumble. As soon as Suho saw the food, his stomach made a loud noise. It smelled like sesame oil. It's a beef porridge that looks and tastes good. Suho grabbed the spoon and started scooping up the porridge. Having starved for 2 days, the food tasted marvelous.
After you finish that, would you like some apples?
Somehow there were apples in the fridge. It turns out that Assistant Professor Lim had been visiting the hospital since the day Suho passed out. Professor had been taking care of him all throughout his life. But after leveling up, Suho didn't feel sick at all. Suho was thinking of getting discharged today when Professor Lim asked something.
Those guys who just left seem to be members of the Hunters Association. What did they tell you? They measured my mana power level. Huh? Measure? Did they confirm that you have really awakened?
Professor Lim's eyes widened.
What was your mana level? They said the dungeon was D class, so you must be E class, according to them. Eh? Really?
The older one couldn't believe it. Suho unfolded the mana level result sheet left by the association member a while ago.
Oh, what? It's true. With mana level at 46, it's even on the lower range among E class. Why do you look so disappointed? Were you expecting something? Wow, goosebumps. Were you really thinking I was going to say that I am a superb class hunter? No wonder you were being so kind. No, you rascal. If you were such a great hunter, you wouldn't have fainted in that dangerous place to begin with. I just thought you were at least D class. See, you were expecting something else.
Professor Lim felt so wronged that he even stood up. He put down the result sheet and tried to appease Suho.
Hey, it's rather better. E-class is great, you punk. Don't you know that being an E-class hunter gives more stability than D-class? No. Of course you wouldn't. You also just gained your consciousness. From now on, trust and follow me. As an E-class old man, I will lead you to the world of E-class hunters.
Dungeon raids are conducted with thorough division of labor. The raiders are the first to attack. The collectors follow from behind to retrieve the bodies of demons or monsters. The miners dig dungeon resources in the backline. Among those, E-class hunters take on any job except as raiders.
In other words, E-class hunters are the most flexible in covering a task.
It's true that they have more stability than half of D-class ones. D-class hunters are the weakest among the hunters who can enter the dungeon raid. In a way, they can be considered as the ones most exposed to risk. Meanwhile, E-class hunters are excluded from all combat activities, so they can earn their wages and at the same time, be safe while doing so.
Of course, some of them need urgent money, so they take risks and volunteer for the raider squad. But it is not common. Their hospital fees get more expensive. Maybe if they have an acquaintance who is a healer or so.
The next day, Suho was discharged from the hospital. He arrived at the Korea University Art Museum.
I never thought I'd come here again.
Suho looked up at the art museum, which was horribly half-destroyed because of Beru, and self-reflected. He went there today to work as a miner. Except for the Shadow Dungeon, it's the first real-world dungeon he went to just because Professor Lim offered to assist him.
Oh, for your information, all classes are temporarily non-face-to-face until the dungeon is completely raided. Suho, you're going to take a leave of absence since you are now a hunter, right?
Suho responded with determination.
Of course, sir. Besides, the exhibit is now over as well as the semester.
Assistant Professor Lim nodded.
Okay, I'll stop by the assistant's office later and apply for a hunter leave of absence too. Should we start now?
Assistant Professor Lim's eyes glimmered as he looked at Suho with full motivation. His stance posed a senior figure.
Today I will give you a quick guide on the life of a wise E-class hunter. First of all, minors.
He's showing off too much like a know-it-all. Suddenly, Baru muttered as he jumped out of Suho's shadow. Professor Lim was so startled he fell on his butt.
Monster?
Baru looked at the professor with a condescending gaze.
Tisk, scaredy cat. Professor, I know more about hunters way better than you do. Better learn from me instead.
He then jumped in front of Suho and spoke loudly with his arms spread wide.
Hunters are described by their name itself. They hunt. Their goal is to slaughter, overcome, and devour the enemies. So they must kill again and again in order for their power to be, eh?
Suho grabbed Baru like a paw.
Why did you suddenly come out?
Kum, I felt the energy of the dungeon nearby. Right now, young master is as weak as a larva, so I'd be relieved if I could stay close and protect you.
Swook! Baru's body stretched out and escaped from Suho's hand. He jumped on Suho's shoulder and flashed a pitiful look on his face. Suho could no longer be deceived.
If I let this pass again, he'd never stop talking.
Professor Lim, who finally collected himself, carefully pointed at Baru and asked,
Suho, is that a summoner?
No.
Baru answered sternly in place of Suho. To be accurate, Baru was his father's summoned monster and not his.
If you are not a summoner, then what are you, sir?
Professor Lim seemed to be so intimidated that he started speaking with honorifics. Baru glared at him.
I'm a guardian.
Guardian?
That's right. In human terms, should I say uncle?
Baru muttered an incomprehensible sound and glanced at Suho's face. Professor Lim ignored Baru and asked Suho directly.
Did you awaken as a hunter with summoning skills? Well, yeah, I guess that's how it went. Interesting. I have never seen an E-class hunter with that skill before.
Professor Lim was lost for words. He didn't bother to talk about that skill being the most irrelevant anymore. Not to mention Suho is an E-class on top of that.
Minor among the most minors.
The professor turned his gaze to Baru, who was on Suho's shoulder. He was just simply surprised at Baru's sudden appearance. But looking at him now...
Those gazes of yours are very offensive. Do you want me to pluck those eyes?
Professor Lim lowered his gaze. He seemed to be very observant, seeing how he's very sensitive with his surroundings. Surprisingly, he can also talk. That's pretty useful.
Not all E-class hunters have that skill. You are still considered lucky. Just to share with you, my skill is escaping. Oh, so that's why you're good at running away.
Professor Lim felt hurt by Suho's remarks. It hurt because it was true. Suho became a minor through Professor Lim's recommendation. Suho stepped into the bustling world of miners.
All right, let's work hard.
Miners consist mostly of E-class hunters who looked like they were working at a construction site.
Newbie, come and take your pickaxe.
Grab! Suho held the dungeon pickaxe with his hand. The man handing out the pickaxes smiled at him.
If it breaks while you're working, you can come back and get another one. But we would need to deduct the cost from your daily wage, so be careful. You're very young, but already very commendable. I heard you're still a student. Hey, do you know this student?
Surprisingly, most of the miners recognized him.
Most likely because of the news.
Suho smiled bitterly as he recalled the news that was posted on the internet yesterday and today. Was the headline something like, Hero of Korea University, become an E-class hunter? It was vague, so he didn't know if that was a compliment or not. If he had become a hero of the art museum as an ordinary person, he would have won a Brave Citizen Award. But he awakened midway, so he was just recognized as a hunter. On top of that, he turned out to be part of the lowest hunter class. That kind of situation seemed to turn out well for these uncles though.
Haha, what a shame. If only I had awakened a class or two higher, my situation must be completely different. Don't be too sad because your class is low-tilled. We also eat and live well, don't we? Right. It's quite hard physically, but at least we don't need special skills aside from being good at using the pickaxe.
Everyone was eager to give Suho words of advice, as it had been so long since there was a newcomer. Baru didn't like the warm atmosphere.
Young master, go and level up instead of dealing with these idiots. Don't waste your time.
Oh, is that a summoner? Yeah, it's my first time seeing something like this. It would be cute having him around, but it's too small to be useful for mining.
Miners gathered in awe at the sudden appearance of Baru. Baru was too cynical and ferocious.
Hey, don't come near me, you rude creatures. Young Master is very weak and he could die if he gets hurt. Young Master, rest assured, I will protect you.
Suho stared blankly at Baru. He didn't know if Baru was just being protective or sarcastic.
Wahaha, this summoner is reliable. Might as well try to work too.
Baru's cuteness made the miners chuckle as they moved away in twos or threes, holding their pickaxes. Suho got a brilliant idea.
Chapter 9, Chapter 09. Yes, young master. Baru, who responded to Suho's orders, tried to ask once more. Are we going to stab those men behind their backs and kill them? What are you talking about? They are going to work. Baru jumped down and was enraged. What is he saying? He couldn't believe it. What on earth is this all about? The Shadow Monarch's power ability was so great and mighty, only to be used for mining. In outer space, those millions of troops are fighting in a war. Such a futile thing to use it for mining here. I get that, but right now we only have 3 weak shadow goblins. We need to be practical. I'm pretty sure my father also worked this way before when he was weaker. Ha, but still. You also told me last night. Suho recalled the conversation he had with Baru the other day. They were on their way home after being discharged from the hospital. Baru spoke with a serious expression. Young master, I will briefly summarize our mission. What the fist-sized creature said was too grand. Firstly, protect Earth from the monsters of outer space. You mean to go into the dungeon and catch the monsters, right? Yes. As you hunt monsters, your level will gradually rise, young master. The stronger you become, the safer Earth will be. Secondly, we must somehow find Miss Hae-in. Right. Do you have ways on how we can locate my mother? Unfortunately, there's none. But who knows, as we catch those extraterrestrial monsters, we might find some clues. In the end, this also meant entering the dungeon. Lastly, this is the most important one. Baru pointed at himself. I need to recover as soon as possible and return to the battlefield where His Majesty is. The balance being maintained there must be at stake as I, the core power, is missing. Suho was also curious. Baru's current small form was just a way to conserve his strength as much as possible, but his original form and power were a living nightmare itself. With such a huge amount of power missing, he couldn't imagine what the war was like. What should we do to regain your strength? The corners of Baru's mouth rose. Of course I need to eat. It was an absolutely evil and dreary smile. It's been so long, in the fragments of a world long forgotten now. He remembered the Queen of Ants. I'm going to make the strongest soldier. The Queen needed the strongest soldier to rebuild the kingdom that was being destroyed by humans and lead the kingdom's inhabitants. It went on for 6 months. She eventually conceived a life by gathering all her mana and nourishment. That determination and the main goal of exterminating all humans were combined, creating a terrible monster beyond imagination. The monster's innate skill is predation. It could make some of the mana and intellect of the target its own just by consuming the target. Baru spoke after recalling those memories. My natural skill is predation. Continuously devouring either human or mana gradually replenishes my strength. It's an inefficient method that was used in the past, but it's nothing much now, both for humans and monsters. Suho felt it again. Baru definitely lacks humanity. He's not a human after all. The sight of Baru drooling as he mentioned eating humans was the perfect devilish image itself. Suho spoke firmly. But still, don't eat any humans, huh? If you do, only eat bad people. Baru's eyes squinted at those words. As expected, like father, like son. His Majesty mentioned the same thing. A long time ago, he also ordered me to eat only the wicked if I were to consume humans. My father too? What's your standard for being wicked then? Well, of course. Bell smiled faintly. The ones who harm young master, back to the present. That was what you told me. Baru brought up Suho's words. So, of course, shouldn't you be entering the dungeon and leveling up? How can an E-class hunter enter a dungeon alone? You know very well that E-class hunters cannot be raiders. Suho was being extremely realistic. Professor Lim also explained that the only tasks E-class hunters can take are for production work. He was thinking of going for reassessment after his mana power level reaches D-class range. The division of hunter class was also a system that has recently been established, so there are still errors in the meter. So, let's start with what we can do now. Suho smiled as he said that. Baru didn't feel good about that smile. Why are you smiling like that at me? Our third mission. Suho recalled what Baru said with a knowing smile. You must regain your mana as soon as possible, so you need to eat, right? Yes, whether humans or monsters. What about mana stone? Flinch. Baru's expression hardened. You said your skill is predation. Wouldn't your mana be recharged if you eat mana stone? That's right, but the stone has very little mana, so it only fills my stomach, and the efficiency is not so. Is that a problem? You can just eat more than that. Suho smiled brightly at him. You can pick them up freely here. Keep Gek. Suho passed through the gate with the miners. The appearance of the dungeon he entered was completely different from the Shadow Dungeon. The Shadow Dungeon was a vast, ruined city that was so wide no one could even guess its size. This place, on the other hand, was a winding cave. In addition, each person had a pickaxe in their hands, so it felt like they were here, literally, to mine. Suho and the miners moved slowly as they moved forward. Inside the dungeon, the view was not very dark thanks to the luminescent mushrooms and moths everywhere. Quang, 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 quang. The sound of mining works echoed loudly. Perhaps because everyone had experience, the sound of pickaxing was very uniform and rhythmic. Suddenly, all of those sounds stopped at the same time. Huh? What's that? Everyone turned in that direction. There was Suho commanding the shadow goblins. Kirk! Kirk! Kehehe! 3 shadow goblins were pickaxing while laughing. There was Suho nagging them from behind. Amazing! So that's how the summoning skill works. No wonder people were surprised. The said skill was well known to be used in assisting in combat with the help of useful creatures. However, the summoners just followed behind Suho, who was giving instructions like a Pokemon trainer. It works though. Quang, 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 quang. Kehehe. The shadow goblins that Suho was giving commands to looked a little smaller and weaker than normal goblins. But they had enough strength to wield the pickaxe, and most of all, they never got tired no matter how much they worked. Whereas Suho needed to drain a bit of his mana to replenish his used strength. Wow. Look, those newbies are amazing. Ha ha ha! Suho shouted and laughed at Suho. It was all nonsense to say that the summoning skill is useless. It was such an incredible skill. Even now as we're distracted, they might be able to dig up everything by themselves. We can't let that happen. Let's show our seniority in terms of experiences. The miners chuckled and started pickaxing again. It felt quite pleasant to see the short goblins working together next to each other. Such a nuisance. Seeing that warm situation, Baru at the back chewed the mana stone like a cookie. Meanwhile, at that same time, the raiders, made up of D-class or higher class hunters, were raiding a place far deeper than the mining area. This dungeon is absolutely empty. I know. Only wolf monsters have been popping up since earlier. Wolf skins don't pay. The collectors, who were following the raiders and skinning the monster corpses, weren't too happy. Of course, that's what they said, but that didn't mean that wolf skin was not worth any money. Besides, sometimes there were corpses with mana stones, so they had no choice but to work hard. Phew, we need to earn money either way. Wolf skins piled up on the wagon he had brought. Right then. Huh? It seems like there's something here. One of the hunters who was walking in the cave in the lead called his companions. Unexpectedly, there was a huge ruin in front of them. The hunters who saw that became very nervous and wary of their surroundings. Could it be that there's a boss-class monster here? Normally there was little chance of powerful boss-class monsters appearing in D-class dungeons. However, the appearance of such a structure meant that something extraordinary could have happened. And that particularity would never have been a pleasant situation for the hunters. What's this? Did something happen to have a ruin like this? Shouldn't we go out and ask for more support? The hunters were making small noises. However, the leader of the raid intervened and looked around with a cautious expression. Shh, be quiet. For now, I haven't detected any monster in my radar skill. Really? How could there be a structure like this without any monsters? That's what we need to find out. A small smile formed on the captain's lips. Who knows? Maybe a treasure is hidden instead of a boss monster. A treasure. The hunter's eyes suddenly changed. Not only monsters' corpses, and the mana stone could be found in the dungeon. There were also rare items. Those items were the only way to increase the strength of hunters whose levels would not increase once their class was determined. "Captain, there's something here." Looking around, a sword was found stuck in the center of the ruins. It was a sword emanating unusual energy. "This is crazy." The hunter's eyes were filled with greed at the same time. "We hit the jackpot. Wow, what a weapon." They would have to take it outside and do an assessment to find out, but it was a weapon that looked great at first glance. "Captain, I will get it." Among the hunters, the strongest man took the lead, spitting on both of his hands. "Oh? Wait, Kim Yong-jun. Take precautions." The captain tried to dissuade him, but his hand had already grabbed the handle of the sword. Right then, a humming voice came into Kim Yong-jun's head. "Who dares covet the sword of the monarch?"